Thank you for doing this.
Oh, no.
Appreciate it.
No, I was just telling Zoe, when we had these for a couple years and we stopped doing them, but I remember one that we had was actually in the sunroom a couple years back, and that was the meeting where there was a big issue on testing centers at that time.
Yeah.
You may or may not remember this, but there used to be
Melissa
these
Goforth,
huge
yeah.
lines, right? And somebody brought up testing centers
All
as
right.
a big deal. And then we got a couple students together who knew exactly what the issue was.
That's a good move.
Yeah.
And
How you been,
they
Miles?
had some of my team.
Good.
Then we just
Good to see
proceeded
you.
on it. It was a mid-semester thing.
I've been getting a little parched up here. So
Yeah.
We basically
I
fixed the testing
stuck my
center.
water bottle up
But
here.
that's an example of something that came out of this meeting that was really, I think, a really positive outcome.
Miles had a better idea. He's like, just grab it from the rack and bring
You
it
guys
up
have
there.
enough room over here? Didn't take it easy on us with the lights now, did they?
Under the hot lights.
Yeah.
It's bright.
You may have to just like interject there. There's a lot of questions out.
I talked to the yesterday.
Yeah.
Most of mine will probably just be adding on.
Right.
Guess we're getting started.
All right, good evening. Can you all hear me? Good. All right, good evening. Good evening. It is good to see you. Certainly want to welcome you to our Student Government and Student Affairs Town Hall. I'm Vernon Hurt, Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, and we're just really excited to have you here. We're looking forward to a great dialogue. First of all, again, let me thank you for being here. Your presence says a lot about your commitment to continuing to ensure that Iowa State University is a great institution, and so we're excited you've taken the time to be a part of the dialogue. Also want to offer thank you to Kathleen Harrison from the Student Affairs Central Office, Derek Doing, Darren Hushak, the MU staff, and again, each one of you, and certainly our panelists who have taken the time to share with us this evening. I am excited to co-moderate our discussion with our Student Government President, Cody West. So, Cody.
Hi, everyone. Like Dr. Hurd said, and my mic's not working, but it will be in a second. Hello? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Awesome. As Dr. Hurt just said, my name is Cody West. I'm the Student Government President here at Iowa State, and I am majoring in biology, and will be graduating this spring, which is really scary to say out loud. But tonight, we just want to take a moment to introduce you all to the panelists, the ones that will actually be answering a majority of your questions tonight. So with that, we're just going to roll right into it. We're very fortunate enough to have multiple members of the upper level administration, as well as our Student Government Vice President. So Provost Wicker, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Cody. Good evening, everybody. My name is John Wickard, and I serve as Senior Vice President and Provost at the university. And I'm also a faculty member here at the university in our College of Engineering. And in my capacity as a university provost, I work with the president, the president's office, and really all of our academic colleges. So all of the deans, all the colleges, all of our academic departments. And I work on the educational programs at the university, the research programs, and our extension and outreach programs as well.
Good evening. My name is Martino Harmon, and I am Senior Vice President for Student Affairs. I've been at Iowa State University for 4 years, and I am absolutely thrilled that you're here tonight for this dialogue. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to have a dialogue, which is really sharing and communicating and listening. So thank you for being here. My role as Senior Vice President for Student Affairs is to really provide leadership to our staff, and our goal is to support students. Our goal is to support you in all of your endeavors, everything that you need really on campus outside of delivering the educational experience, but we support that experience as well. So I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank you for taking time to come tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Is mine on as well? Move it a little closer. Is that better? Maybe now? All right, perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cody Smith. I'm serving as the Vice President of the student body this year. I'm a senior majoring in agricultural communications and political science, and much like Cody, I'm a little nervous to graduate in the spring. So we will make it through, though. Tonight, I'm just here to offer the student input on all of the initiatives in which will be discussed tonight. Most of my responses will just be adding on to the work that we're doing to serve as the liaison between the students and the administration. We have a very unique and privileged role at the university to serve as the liaison between the student body and the administration. So we're really happy that most of you, all of you are here tonight, and we're ready to have discussions and see what we can do. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Reg Chen Stewart, Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. I have been with Iowa State University for 1 year and 11 months, so I'm coming up on 2 years. Very excited to be in service to the community here. Diversity and Inclusion as a division works across the enterprise. We work with faculty, staff, students, community, developing forward-facing initiatives. That's the diversity and inclusion piece, but we also focus on compliance, equal opportunity, Title IX enforcement. Thank you for including me in the conversation tonight, and I look forward to sharing with you some of both what I perceive to be the strengths of Iowa State University and also some of the pressure points and challenges that we also have to address. Thank you.
My name is Miles Lackey, and I serve as Chief of Staff to President Allen, Interim President Allen, as well as CFO for the institution. And in my role as CFO, I spend quite a bit of my time in the financial analysis and budgeting processes, and then the development of financial reports. And so really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and to answer any questions that you may have.
So thank you again to our panelists. Before we get started and launch into our dialogue this evening, we want to kind of give some overview of our format for tonight. And so the first part of our dialogue, over the last few weeks, we have provided the opportunity for members of the community to submit questions around the 4 topic categories that have been selected. And so the 4 categories being campus climate, principles of community, tuition and fees, student health, well-being and campus safety, and infrastructure, facilities. And so we have been able to receive questions, and the first part of our dialogue will be around questions that have been submitted online for each of the categories. And in our second part of the dialogue, we will open up for questions from the floor for any additional questions for these categories. And so Cody will get us started with our first category for the evening, campus climate.
Absolutely. The first question we have this evening is, several bias incidents have occurred on campus this semester. What are some initiatives that all of you are currently working on to promote a better sense of community and safety for everyone at Iowa State University, and specifically those from underrepresented populations? And if Dr. Stewart, if you could start us off, that would be appropriate.
So I did some compartmentalization of this. I wanted to talk about some of the initiatives that were from scratch. And essentially, these are things that didn't exist up to a year or 2 ago. And then also some of the ways that we go about the process of collaboration, because the work is multifaceted and you work in tandem. It wouldn't just be perceived as Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives. It's actually an entire campus effort. So I think the most important thing is it starts from the top down, and we really took a very critical look at how we communicate the messaging when incidents happen. And that started with work this summer, understanding that there were really 4 elements of the way that we communicated out of the president's office that needed a very critical lens. And so we looked at the timeliness of how we message, the fact that we made sure that the messages were fact-filled. Probably the critical missing element in communication in the past was this level of emotional intelligence and communicating the understanding of the hurt and impact of these incidents on campus. And finally, making sure that we talk about procedures. And so all of these elements, these 4 elements, were critical in making sure that you knew that, A, when an incident happens, we had already been processing and thinking about and working on the issue, so it wasn't so reactionary as I think the perception was in the past. So starting from the top down, working with Interim President Allen, and who was fantastic in helping mobilize. We implemented a new process, an all-hands-on-deck process, so that when incidents happen, first thing that next morning, we were all in the president's chambers having a conversation about who does what, who's on first. We reduced the level of emails and communication out so that we could make a much more consistent, concerted effort to address the situation. So when I say that it starts from the top down, I mean literally from the president's office. Moving down, we worked that messaging system through our deans and made sure the deans and the senior vice presidents were also on board with that type of messaging and communication. And then finally distributing that out to department chairs. One of the common questions is how are senior administrators trained and talked about as it relates to communication and interfacing. So know that that was an important part of our work. And then moving forward, being more responsive and quicker with putting things together that mattered. Examples being the Know Your Rights forums and the campus conversations, and being immediate in response. And the most important component that I do want to underscore with both Know Your Rights and campus conversations was bringing our community together to, one, openly discuss the issues, but then also set about being change agents as a community and not any particular entity or department, saying, how are we going to be forward facing with it? Those are really fundamental shifts in how the administration does the work. And that took a lot of give and take for all of us that are assembled on this panel, as well as people in the audience, to redress how we do this work. Just a couple of other items that I thought were important, and this was an important part of the way that we do this work, which is bringing people together for self-empowerment and reducing the level of victimization when incidents happen and you get hurt by them. Being able to have the information, have the support, have the administrative mechanisms to heal, to repair, to move forward, to take action, all of those necessary steps were things that sometimes I think we take for granted that people know how to do. And so being better at mobilizing, I think, is really how I want to punctuate the work. In terms of looking at collaborations, there were some elements of our response and how we engage that I think that we were slow and/or we didn't really have very well fleshed out. And the one that I wanted to underscore for this is, you know, early on we put together a program, a multicultural liaison program with the police department. And whereas I think it was well intended, we didn't really we didn't have the time to really think about what this looks like and how we're going to engage. We went back and completely retooled that program from stem to stern, reframing it as engagement and inclusion officers, increasing the numbers from 3 to 7 with a potential 8th officer, to be very engaged and upfront and open and honest about both the weaknesses as it comes to interfacing, but also receiving information and being more direct. There's much more, and I don't want to monopolize all the time, but I do know that it takes a critical lens to do this work, and it also takes a level of servant leadership and humility, and that's a big part of the change in our process, was being humble enough to hear when we needed to do better.
So I'll just add on, hopefully I can never tell if this is working. Can you hear me? So I'll add on a few points that I think are relevant. Again, this is all, a lot of this is partnership, so this is not just student affairs, but one of the things that several of us are trying to do is really put the messages out about what we stand for as an institution. And the big part of that message is the Iowa State Principles of Community. The Principles of Community were actually created by student government, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And it sort of got buried, sort of got lost. And really a couple years ago, we started to bring that back into the forefront. And we're doing it even more. You can go over to the Student Answer Center in Beardshire, and they actually have posters, and there's a separate poster for each principle of community. For example, in the Division of Student Affairs, you're going to see the entire division will have shirts with messages about the principles of community, and they'll get those shirts, you know, starting next semester. Recreation Services, the entire staff, they have T-shirts, and each shirt has one of the principles on the shirt. So really trying to emphasize what we stand for as an institution, because we need to do that. We need to set the climate. We need to make sure that we're communicating that. A couple of other things that we're working on, and one really is in partnership with the gentleman on my right, Provost Wickert, is we have commissioned a new student onboarding task force. It's a big group, but it's a cross-functional group, and that group is really sort of unpeeling every message, every orientation, everything a new student, all different types of new students, transfer, online students, graduate, undergraduate, everything that they learn from the time of admission throughout their entire first year. Because we're doing a lot of really great things in terms of campus climate information, but it's not really centralized, so we really couldn't tell where the gaps were. So that group is looking and identifying, it's a big process, identifying the gaps. They've used process mapping, they brought in Boeing, which they're experts in the industry in that. And they're at the point now where they're starting to work on recommendations on how we fill those gaps. It's not just diversity and inclusion and campus climate, but also key information that students should get in their first year, whether it be sexual misconduct information, university resources, the key components that all students should get. So we're excited about their recommendations. And then we're also, in the interim, talking with the Department of Residence about, maybe there's a workshop or something that we can consider doing for all residence hall students, since 92% of our new undergraduate students are living in a residence hall. That, again, is more of a stopgap measure as we work on the bigger training issues. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is the Campus Climate Response Team. Again, a cross-functional effort, equal opportunities involved, Dean of Students, ISU PD. I'm probably leaving out a few different departments, but that is a way for when incidents happen, for us to be able to track those incidents, for everyone to be aware. I think Dr. Reg talked about all the emails before, so he may have touched on this a little bit, but also now there's a website that you can go to, Campus Climate
at iastate.edu.
Thank you. I always forget those things. But there's a website that you can go to get information about various responses to campus climate issues, but also to report an incident. And then that incident goes to a select group who can help us really manage how we respond to those incidents. So those are three things I wanted to mention.
Well, if I could just add a few things, and I'd echo what both Martino and Reg have said about this work being a partnership, not only among the people up here, but a partnership with student government, with you and all of our students, and our faculty, and our staff, and our deans and department chairs on campus also. I think the fact is that in the past we weren't getting this right. We weren't doing enough. That's definitely true. And one of the things that I've personally done is just to meet with students and listen, and faculty and staff, to listen to them and their life stories, and also very hurtful experiences that they've had here at Iowa State or in Ames or elsewhere. And I know I've learned a lot from that, and that's helped inform me, and I think it's helped me make better decisions on this very, very critical issue. In addition to some of the other actions that have been discussed up here in the communications and so forth, we've also worked with the academic programs and the colleges in particular. I'm very proud of what the College of Design, for instance, has done in terms of the conversations that have gone on in the design building, led by Dean Luis Rico Gutierrez, with students about climate in the college. We now see the College of Business, for instance, having new staff, recruiting and student services staff, focusing on the success of women students in the College of Business and students of color in the College of Business as well. We've also been doing some training. I'm very pleased by the work that our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching has done recently on what we call the Inclusive Classroom Initiative. And this is a training opportunity for our faculty on campus about the best practices to have a welcoming, positive, inclusive, supportive environment in the classroom. And for all students, students of color, LGBT students, veteran students, non-traditional students, people who are coming back to college after having been out in the workforce, and making sure that the language we're using, the examples we're using, the readings and so forth represent the full diversity of our students here. So the Inclusive Classroom Initiative is directed directly at that classroom learning experience, as well as partnering with student government on language that we can include in the syllabus that will be more inclusive and the like. We've also done training for our academic department chairs on issues of climate and free speech, because they are leaders that are very close to the academic programs in all of our departments across campus. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about supporting our faculty of color. One of the things that is a challenge for us is being able to recruit and retain outstanding faculty at the university, and diversifying our faculty is a very key aspect of that. So we have a program led out of my office, which is directed at the professional success of women and faculty of color here at the university. And in each academic department, we now have an equity advisor that is there to support those faculty so that they can have successful long-term careers here at the university and be outstanding role models for you and all the other students here on campus.
Well, I guess I could follow up. So I think we have a unique position as students, because I think we meet with all of these people probably more often than they meet with each other. So we will hop from meeting to meeting. So our initiatives really boil down to making sure that students have the opportunity to be heard, and not only heard, but supported. And so when we're talking about the Campus Climate Response Team, it's about sharing that information so students know where to go to report those incidents. When we talk about the inclusive classroom training, oftentimes there's programs like that people around campus, because we're so decentralized, don't know exist. So our job as students is to find those weak points and where students are really struggling, and then provide the opportunity for them to get into a space, whether it's in the room with one of these people or if it's on a committee where the programs are being worked on. Our job is to make sure that they have a place to voice their opinion. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for improvement in what we've done. And so far, what we've tried to roll out this year, we being Cody and myself, is with our town hall program. The very first town hall we held this semester was about campus climate. We called it Let's Talk About Campus Climate, because we know that there are incidents on campus where students don't feel supported, where there's, for example, posters going up and it makes people feel like they don't belong here. We want to gauge what is happening on campus as far as a student perspective goes, and then our job is to communicate that to these individuals, and then also make sure that we're implementing different things such as more town halls or issuing statements so that students know that they're supported by campus leadership, both at the university level and at the student level. And additionally, I think it's very important that when we go to fill committees and worry about student representation around the university, for us to find students who are passionate or affected by these certain issues. If there's students affected by infrastructure and accessibility, then they should have a voice on the University Services Advisory Committee. There's different things like that we can do all around. A good example of that is in student government. We have our diversity committee led by Julie and Neely. And we have groups from all over campus, and we kind of, at the beginning of every meeting, we just take a pulse of what students are feeling based on whatever group they represent. So we make sure that we're getting that input from students, and our job is to make sure that these people know exactly what the pulse is and where we're getting our information, and then how we can proceed from there.
I think I may just add one thing. To build on a lot of the comments that have been made, when you look at the principles of community, and when we've had discussions about creating what is really an open and welcome campus, at the heart of that too is making sure that campus programming is accessible, to individuals with disabilities, right? So talking about that population and designing programs for those folks, but also looking at making improvements to our infrastructure for individuals with disabilities so that our buildings are more accessible. Now, we do have an aging infrastructure, and so some of the progress that is being made there, it is slow because it's resource intensive. But that is a priority as well, but also expanding programming. There's a program called Project Search, really which is geared towards expanding those learning opportunities to individuals that historically maybe did not have programming geared towards them that have learning disabilities, so that they too, it's all part of that land grant mission, right? And reaching all folks and promoting access to everyone. So it's kind of a two-part approach there to accessing individuals with disabilities.
All right, great. We'll move to our next category, which is tuition and fees. So, Mr. Lackey, I'll ask you to get us started on this next question.
Yeah,
we recognize that the issue of affordability is very important to our students. What steps are members of the administration taking to make sure that the Iowa State education is both accessible and affordable?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. Well, it starts with our fundraising efforts, right? I mean, so there really has been an emphasis placed on raising private support for student scholarships. Last year, we raised $16 million for student scholarships. And as we were putting together our appropriations request for this year, we've settled, and in fact, it was just approved by the Board of Regents, a $5 million appropriations increase is what we will be requesting in the state legislature this year. And again, that will just be directed towards student-based scholarships. And we've got a lot of advocating to do with the state legislature, but that is our priority. That is our appropriations request for this year. But we're also trying to be thoughtful about how we invest the resources that we currently have, and making sure that we're operating as efficiently as possible, so that those precious resources that we do have, that we are truly directing those towards the institutional mission, and ultimately so that those resources will be used to serve students. So it comes down to raising private support, also increasing the amount of state support that we receive, but also using those resources efficiently. There's also really, there's an education piece about this as well, right? So making those wise decisions on the front end about understanding what the consequences are for certain decisions that students make with respect to borrowing, and just making sure that those decisions are informed up front. So.
Yeah, just to add a little bit on to that, yes, I think it's on. So we currently distribute really over $102 million in financial aid. About 63% is merit-based aid, and the other 37% is need-based aid. But I would tell you that, you know, it is still a challenge. I mean, affordability is part of our mission as a land grant, so it's critically important. But as we continue to see an erosion of state support, that makes it really difficult to continue to meet students' needs. It makes it difficult for us to keep the quality of the institution, the quality of the faculty, the quality of the staff up without getting some resources from somewhere. And we're being really sort of pushed into a position where if we can't get resources from the state in order to keep the quality up, then we have to look to the students. And that's not the place where we want to be, because that impacts affordability. That is a significant concern of ours, but you know, we really need to continue to advocate for more state resources, because we don't want students to, you know, be in a situation where they aren't able to afford Iowa State University. Now, currently, Iowa State, if you compare to peer institutions or even the big institution to the east of us, we are still extremely affordable. But if we don't get resources, then we could lose that position. And we still have students on this campus who are struggling to pay tuition and fees. We have students who are non-residents who come here and owe anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000, and they work with our accounts receivable department, they make payments, and they never get caught up. And in many cases, by the time they get to the end of their second year, they wash out. So one of the things that we are working with the foundation on is to develop a pool of funds that would be for sort of emergency or a gap fund, a fund that is not tied to the student from this county who's left-handed, who is 6 feet tall, a really sort of unrestricted fund that students could apply for if they're really in critical need. We also are part of a consortium of universities called the University Innovation Alliance, and they've launched a grant program that we are participating in where we can distribute small grants to students who are 30 hours or less away from graduation, but owe $1,000 or less, and there's no other solution for them, and it's preventing them from graduating. So we'll be launching that next semester, but it's very limited. So we need to have more programs like that and more flexible funding. So affordability is a challenge. We're doing what we can, but we need to look for other solutions as well as more support from the state.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is an absolutely critical question for Iowa State University. And what we try to do is we try to get the balance right. This is like everything in life. You try to get the balance right on cost and on quality. And we work very hard. I work every day on this issue of balancing affordability and quality. There's several ways to think about it. We've already spoken a little bit about the importance of state appropriations. When you think about the revenue that comes into Iowa State University, we're about $1.5 billion organization. There's a lot going on here. Some of the funding comes from the state of Iowa, the taxpayers of Iowa, and then those tax dollars are appropriated to us by our legislature. And unfortunately, the trend has been to cut the budgets to the Regents universities, Iowa State, University of Iowa, and University of Northern Iowa. And as someone who's been in education my whole life, it really I find it really disturbing to see that cuts are made to what is really about the future of the state. It's about the future of young people in the state, their success, and the economy and the vibrancy of the state. It's really cutting the future. So I'm very disturbed by that. Unfortunately, it's a national trend. Here in Iowa and in other states across the country, many universities are under attack now in terms of having state appropriations cut. So clearly our first preference would be for the people of Iowa, our legislators, to appropriate more funding to the university so that tuition doesn't have to go up. Nobody wants tuition to go up. I do not want tuition to go up. I don't know anybody who wants tuition to go up. I have a daughter who will be going into college soon. Tuition's on my mind every day. But I also think about the quality issue. I want you to have high quality academic programs. You do. You're going to graduate with your degrees. You're going to get good jobs. You're going to go off and have successful lives. Iowa State is going to prepare you extremely well. I'm so confident of this, extremely well through your education here for your lives. But if I think about what the university looks like 5 years or 10 years or 20 years now, we need to be making decisions that make sure we're protecting the reputation and the quality of this institution for the students that are going to come after you. And the fact is that we have buildings that are in very sore shape right now. Many of the science laboratories, the chemistry laboratories, Gilman Hall, Zaffarano. You look at Lago. Anybody go into the restrooms in Coover recently? An electrical engineering building, right? Some of the hottest fields are computers and software, and yet we're having trouble recruiting faculty to come to Iowa State University with such poor facilities. And it saddens me when I see tour groups on campus getting their tours at campus, and they see the condition of some of our facilities. So I think about that. I think about our student-faculty ratio. Campus-wide, our student-faculty ratio is about 19-to-1, but that includes all programs across campus. Our College of Engineering, it's closer to 39-to-1. And we know that, student success, the quality of learning improves when you're in smaller section classes and you're able to have more direct contact with the faculty members. So the analysis I've done says that we really need to hire, with the enrollment growth we've had, we really need to hire about 300 additional tenured or tenure-track faculty to start to get that under control. And we need to not only complete building projects that are in the pipeline right now, but we also need to address some of the very significant deferred maintenance issues that we have on campus. we've started the deferred maintenance issues. We've done some renovations of classrooms in Pearson, in Hamilton, in Marston, some other places. But with the recent state budget cuts, we've actually turned off renovation projects in the Lush Auditorium over in Kildee Hall and other areas. So unfortunately, we've actually had to slow some of this down. So I think the state appropriations, tuition, private fundraising, we've already spoken about a little bit. But I will tell you that is private fundraising is a key expectation for our academic deans. And I see a couple in the room here tonight, and they know that securing private gifts from alumni, from companies, from friends of the university, we have such generous donors to this institution who give back. And that private funding is an important source of scholarship. So in addition to the central student financial aid, all of our academic colleges have scholarships through funds that are raised through those kinds of private gifts. And you know, I'm thrilled by the work of Dean Beata Schmidtman in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, where she has set as a priority. You may have heard about this $145 million gift, the endowment that will be created through that gift to benefit students in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which will benefit every student on campus. But in particular, it'll allow the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences to triple the number of scholarships that it awards. So it's work like that, I think, that's positive, positive momentum. But we did not give raises to employees at Iowa State University last year. So I have to look faculty who are working harder than ever in the eye and tell them that they're not getting a raise. Today, the average faculty member at Iowa State University is teaching 19% more than they were 7 years ago. And they were working hard 7 years ago. And they're teaching more. In our Department of Mathematics, our Department of Mathematics today does 35% more teaching than they did 7 years ago. And yet they only have 6% more faculty. So our faculty and our outstanding staff, our academic advisors, are stepping up more than ever. And to echo the point that Miles Lackey made initially, Iowa State University is an efficiently run university. The additional teaching our faculty are doing. President Allen recently identified $20 million in savings that we've achieved at the university since 2014. So we're trying to be very good stewards of the money we have. We're trying to raise private funding and seek out new sources of revenue for the university. But the challenge before us is really protecting that academic quality, and that's a commitment we have. And we work very hard on the state appropriation side, and in an ideal world, we would not raise tuition. But I do believe we will be looking to propose a tuition increase for the next year, and those will be decisions made by our president and our Board of Regents in consultation with student government leaders. Out in the academic colleges, our deans have had over 30 different meetings with students regarding tuition proposals for next year to get feedback, to listen, to talk about these issues. But it's a vital issue for our campus.
Well, I guess I would just follow up with that and saying that, is this on? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I would just follow up with that and say that for student government, and specifically for Cody and myself, communication is key. So we start at the student level, and we host town halls, and we hear the stories that students have. We hear students who have to choose between buying the books for their classes or buying groceries for the month, or paying their rent for that month, or getting new tires for their vehicle, whatever it may be. We hear those stories all the time. So our job and our crucial role that we have in this discussion is to make sure that we're communicating that on. We can share those stories, and that's the most powerful thing that we have as students. So when we go through and we talk to students, we make sure that we communicate those stories to the administration, but also to the Board of Regents, and then furthermore to the governor. So specifically some things that we're excited to see this year in regard to increased communication. This year we've been able to, Cody and I travel to every Board of Regents meeting here in the state, and then along with the GPSS president, Vivek Lawana, and our director of governmental affairs, Cody Olson, we travel to every one of those meetings. And in the past, the breakfast portion with the student leaders and the regents from the universities, we had about, 60 minutes, I believe, before, to talk about, really it was just a highlight reel of all of the good things that are happening at Iowa State. And that's important to communicate to the regions, to show them that the work that they're doing is important and the benefits that we offer back to the state of Iowa. However, what we've done is we've transitioned from talking for that 1 hour about the highlight reel to increasing that to 90 minutes to talk about the more difficult situations in which students are facing. So that's a step in the right direction for us, because instead of going in and saying, these are all of the great things that are happening and just celebrating, we're able to have the difficult conversations and making sure that we're getting the resources at our universities to the students among us who are the most vulnerable. So we've been having conversations with our Office of Financial Aid. We've been having conversations with the regents themselves about what we can do to make sure that the students who might be in the situation that Martino described can get that aid as soon as possible and in a way that's affordable for them and helpful when they need it. And so as we move through the year, we've been thinking about different ways that we can communicate our student stories to all levels of government. This year has been really interesting. The first day or second day of our administration, President Leith decided to head down to Auburn. So we had that transition. We've had a new Board of Regents president. We've had 2 new regents and a new governor and lieutenant governor in the state. So top to bottom, we've had an opportunity to reinstate how important it is for students to share their stories. So for the first time in at least a number of years, for the first time to my recollection, the student presidents and vice presidents from the 3 regent schools sat down with the governor of Iowa and the lieutenant governor of Iowa for about 45 minutes to an hour to discuss the importance of higher education in the state and what we offer. So as we move forward, what we'll continue to do is offer avenues and be accessible to students so they can communicate their stories to us, and then we can in turn communicate their needs and their positions to the rest of the administration, the Board of Regents, and the state of Iowa.
Perfect.
Might just add one more item on the tuition's been brought up a number of times here, and where I said it was a bit of a unique year from a scheduling perspective. Normally you would have your tuition proposals that would go before the Board of Regents in October. That schedule has changed this year. Looked like maybe we were going to consider it in December. That now looks like that too will be pushed back. I just learned shortly before walking on stage. So there will be more information forthcoming on that.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to move into our next topic on student health and well-being. We have a couple questions in this category, so want to be courteous to the audience's time and move through them fairly quickly. So Dr. Harmon, this first one is for you, and if you could just give a brief, quick overview. What is the future vision for health and wellness initiatives at Iowa State University?
I'm going to sing until the mic kicks in. Yeah, okay, you can hear me good. You probably all want to get up and leave now when I start singing. No, so Cody, I appreciate that question, and whoever submitted that question from the website. When I go to sleep at night, what I think about the most, what keeps me awake at night, is the concern for our students' health, wellness, and safety. Nothing is worse than to know that students are suffering from anxiety, depression, and the really tragic situations of suicides on campus. I want Iowa State, and I said this when I was interviewing for this job, I am absolutely 1,000% determined that Iowa State University will be the destination where students will want to be because of our strong health, wellness, and safety initiatives, particularly health and wellness, as safety is, of course, in other departments. But the reason why I have that vision and the reason why it's so important is it doesn't matter how smart you are, what kind of academic credentials you came with. If you are not healthy, if you don't have holistic health and wellness, if you don't have support, if you don't have a great student health center when you are sick, if you're not preventing illnesses, then you will not be successful. So this is critically important, and it's been a top priority for my division. Stated, it's on all of our literature, but it's not just words. I've structured us in a way so that our key health services, Thielen Student Health Center, Recreation Services, Counseling Center, and our new student wellness program, they are all now together in one organizational unit. So they have the ability now to collaborate, to be synergistic, to really focus on achieving that vision, that mission of being the best. And we now have leadership that's structured to provide them the support. So we have an assistant vice president for student health and wellness services. We have an interim in that role, Aaron Baldwin, who did a fantastic job of really leading the Student Health Center through some dark times and really turning that around. So I'm excited about the structure. I'm excited about the student wellness program and office that was formed. They have 26 peer educators that are out talking prevention. You know, we want to prevent students from having to go to the counseling centers. We want to reduce stress. We want to emphasize fitness and financial wellness and all sorts of type of wellness. And that's what that student wellness program is designed to do. In the counseling center, that is really a huge challenge because so many students now need counseling services, and that number is constantly growing. And students aren't afraid to say, I need help anymore. So campuses across the country are struggling with that. We've added in the last 2 years 9 different positions, 6 actual counselors and 3 additional interns in student counseling. And we've added, actually, we went from 1 to 3 psychiatric professionals in the Teelan Student Health Center. It's not enough. It's not enough. We struggle still to meet that demand. We're at a point in the Student Health Center where, in the Counseling Center and the Student Health Center, where we're out of space. We had to take offices in the Counseling Center and Student Services Building and make them smaller to fit 3 additional counselors, which thanks to student government and the students who agreed to help us with some additional funding for mental health services. We don't have any more space. We have to now look at creative solutions. We have to look at, really, we're in the process of a feasibility study to see if we can really build a new building that would house all of these services either in the same building or in the same section of campus, because we've outgrown everything. So this is a significant challenge. We've moved the sexual misconduct prevention coordinator into that student wellness office and program so that Jasmine Hudson is working with them. You probably have heard about the Green Dot program, which is a violence prevention program, focuses on bystander intervention. So this is a significant initiative for us, but it is so critical and so important. And I'm not sugarcoating. It is a major challenge. We've gained a lot, we've done a lot, but we're still challenged. We have finally, I'm sorry, I'm going too long. We have actually brought in a consultant to work with the counseling center to really look at some of the team dynamics and how we can make sure our work environment is positive. You know, we've brought in more counselors, but we've lost some that have moved on to other opportunities. You know, how do we make sure that the work environment is great, that the leadership is supportive, and some new creative approaches? So, you know, we are realizing that we have work to do, but this work is so critical that we just have to put all the effort in that we can.
Great. Dr. Harmon, you actually touched a number of the questions there. So I want to ask one additional question around campus safety. In light of national events, how has Iowa State University prepared to respond to challenging events on campus? And so I asked Mr. Lackey if he would get us started.
Yeah, so I think one of the ways in which there really has been a very tangible and noticeable change is just the number of ISU police officers that you'll see on patrol. There's been a 30% increase of officers that are on patrol with a particular emphasis at those large events where there's going to be large groups of folks. We've also hired a number of multilingual officers to better support diverse communities. So really stepping up that presence there, I think, is something that does stand out. So I would say that that would be one major area.
And if I can add, I think a very important component to this conversation is the realization that threat and crisis are real. You know, universities were slow to really, I think, truly understand the gravity of potential danger, actual danger, real danger. And I think that you just turn on your television set now and realize that that hurt can come in so many different ways, whether you're at the movie theater or at church. And so taking a really strong reflective look at just how dangerous public assembly can be was an important part of really reframing and looking at how we approach it. So I wanted to give a quick note of thanks to Dr. Rachel Boone and Regent Johnson from the Iowa Board of Regents, because they've doubled, tripled down on the construct of safety and security, and then we've rebuilt the commission, representative of all the Regents institutions, to really zero in on this work, to make recommendations at the board level so that it can trickle down to campuses, to make real overtures towards making campuses safer.
And with that, we're going to move into the last topic that's structured tonight: infrastructure, facilities, classrooms, and residence halls. This one's for any members that want to start on the panel. Given the strain on current resources due to enrollment growth over the past decade, would the university consider limiting enrollment?
Yeah, I should take that for sure. So, you know, this is a intriguing question, but it's rather complex, because for those of you who don't remember, when you applied to Iowa State University, there's something called the Regents Admissions Index. And that is our statewide standard for public institutions of getting admitted to any public institution in Iowa. So it's sort of the minimum standard. It incorporates your high school GPA, courses, key courses that you took in high school. There's an option for class rank if your school has class rank, and then standardized test scores. And if you have an RAI score of 245, you're admitted. Period. If you're an Iowa resident, that's pretty much guaranteed. And many of our students have well above a 245, and we have not seen a decline in that score. So we have some really strong students, many here at Iowa State University. Our average student has a 3.5 GPA and a 25 ACT. So we are not lacking in quality, but because we are popular in terms of our academic programs, our student culture here, involvement, engagement, students want to be here. So the complexity is, okay, well, then how do you limit enrollment? You know, some people would suggest, well, maybe we don't have to apply that standard to non-residents. But non-residents from different states bring diversity to this campus. Not just diversity in terms of race or ethnicity, but diversity in terms of being from different places. You know, from Texas. I mean, they you know, they're cold right about now, but they bring diversity to Iowa State University, and that's a great thing. And also, non-residents generate revenue that helps keep the university functioning. And we're not, you know, wanting them just for revenue, but that's the reality. So, you know, where do you cut? You know, where do you cut enrollment? So what we're doing is a couple things. We're really trying to implement what's called enrollment management. And there's a misnomer here, and it's been here for years, that you can't have an RAI in enrollment management. What enrollment management means is you're planning enrollment, and you're calibrating recruitment based on what you want. So if you want more residents, you calibrate recruitment that way. If you want more non-residents from certain states, you focus your recruitment that way. Certain colleges, if you're over capacity on certain programs, you don't recruit as hard for those programs. Programs that you need more students, you recruit harder for. So our Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Success, Laura Doring, has really been out with some of her team engaging with the colleges about enrollment management. The other two things that we've done is we have increased the standards for transfer students. So transfer students, we used to have the minimum GPA of a 2.0, and that will be now a 2.25. So we've changed that a little bit, and we have retention data that shows that will help. And then we've also eliminated a program called Summer Trial, which gave students who had a slightly less than 245 RAI an opportunity to come the summer before, and if they got certain grades, they could continue. Well, we still care about those students, and we'll look at them on a case-by-case basis, but what we found is that during the summer, that support system that you get in the fall they're not necessarily linked with that support system real well. So we want to build a new support system for those students, but not just have a program where we say, okay, you can try in the summer, and if you sink, you know, oh well, we gave you a chance. And so we have some opportunities to really look at our enrollment more in a fine-tuned way. But to limit enrollment with the RAI and the need for more students, it's not a priority. And we're leveling right now. As you know, our enrollment this fall was about 300 students less than it was the prior year. So once you, Miles loves this statement, and I've said it a lot, once you turn that spigot down, it's hard to turn it back up. You know, you could make some decisions and we could end up being an institution that's a lot smaller than we really need to be. And that could have some dire consequences. So I think the fact that we're leveling is where we need to be, and we need to stay, you know, around where we are now.
Yeah, if I could add on to Martino's comments, which I completely agree with it. I think you explained it very, very clearly. I've seen places that have capped enrollment, and it's really backfired, and it's done the exact opposite. In fact, enrollment just sort of plummets because people start to think it's a very exclusionary, you know, kind of place. You know, I think it also comes back, I think the question really comes back to mission and sort of who we are at Iowa State University. You know, we've spoken about the fact, and you know that we're a land-grant institution, and we take the issue of accessibility, affordability, and quality, and try to hit that sweet spot. You know, for me, I want us to be the type of institution where if a student wants to come here and get an education at Iowa State, I want her to come here, you know, and it's our job up here to figure out how to keep up with the student demand. So it challenges us, that's for sure. But I think the enrollment growth has challenged us to be a better university. I think we're better now doing things than we were 5, 6, 7 years ago before the enrollment growth really started. Now it's been really challenging, and there's a lot of pressure points on campus with the enrollment growth. So I think the challenge has not been so much that we've grown, but simply at the rate at which we've grown. You know, we had years where we were growing by 1,000 students a year. We had 2 years where we grew by 2,000 students in 1 year. You know, in the past decade, we've gone from about 26,000 to 36,000. We've grown by 10,000 students, you know, over the past decade. So I think it's been the rate of growth that has really stressed the system. And it takes time to respond to that because you can only build a Joffrey Hall, you know, so fast. You can only add on to Bessie Hall so fast. You can only break ground on the Student Innovation Center, you know, so fast. So I think if you can stick with us a little bit, we're now starting to catch up on some of these things. I look around the country and I see how a lot of universities pride themselves on unlimiting enrollment, or by raising admission standards as a technique to limit enrollment. And then these universities brag about how many students they turn away. We had this many applications and this many students are able to come here. I've gone on campus tours with my daughter, so I know, I've heard the shtick, how hard it is to get in here, how many students we turn away. I think that's a lousy way to measure a university. I don't want to be measured by how many students we don't educate. I want us to be measured by how many students we do educate. So this has been a key issue that we worked on hiring folks, on building out facilities. But my belief is we should not limit enrollment, that it's our job and our commitment to keep up with it. And this year, with the tapering off of enrollment a little bit, I think it's giving us a year to catch up a little bit, which is very, very helpful.
Great. Thank you all so much. We want to prepare to shift to the next part of our discussion and open the floor to take questions. We have about 30 or 35 more minutes in our dialogue for this evening. So we're asking that we'll be as concise as possible in posing our questions so that we're able to get to as many questions as possible. I want to thank some of our student government leaders who have mics. And so if you wish to ask a question, just raise your hand. Okay, we have our first question here to my left, and then we'll come here.
Hello, my name is Heather. Recently on this campus, there's been a student organization that has sent out threatening tweets. One of them was directed towards the president, which prompted a visit by Secret Service. When students saw this and were concerned and went to administration, they were told this is free speech. I'm a transgender woman. I'm also disabled. I'm also a conservative and a capitalist. I don't feel safe when I see chalking saying fascists and Nazis and capitalists don't deserve a safe space. If there were chalkings that said LGBT people don't deserve a safe space, don't belong here, that would have been dealt with. It would have been said, oh, that's free speech. I have discovered that in the state of Iowa, political affiliation is a protected class. Do you think it is time that Iowa State and the rest of the Regent universities add political affiliation so people of all political stripes can feel safe in expressing their opinion and not feel that they're going to be at minimum vilified or at worst feel like their lives are threatened? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to ask our university counsel, Mr. Mike Norton, if you would share. Or Martino, you're going to? Okay.
I'll start, but Mike, you certainly are, especially on the political affiliation part, because I'm not qualified to answer that. So Heather, I appreciate your question, and this is something that has been difficult for us because we have had chalkings on campus, and we have had other messages that are hurtful, that are inappropriate in many ways, and it's difficult because it crosses that border between freedom of expression, hate speech, which is hurtful, and threats and harassment, and that's an important distinction. So one of the things I did want to mention, because some of the information may have been really not accurately reported on that particular tweet about the capitalists. So there was a response via an Iowa State administrator to the Twitter feed that mentioned freedom of speech. Unfortunately, what that particular person didn't know, because tweets happen so fast, is that the university had already reached out to that particular group. And the reason why we reached out is because of the threatening nature of the tweet. So again, a tweet could be hurtful, it could be hate speech, but that tweet was starting to cross the line. So that particular group was actually contacted and met with university officials, and they agreed to remove that tweet. And we received a complaint from a group of students, and we followed up with them, and they knew that the group removed the tweet, and they were okay with that. But that was an opportunity that we could take to call a student in. And anytime we have a situation like that, even if it is hate speech, which is protected, we have the opportunity to have a conversation with a student or a group of students. And if that particular issue crosses that line of threats and intimidation, it could end up being an educational moment all the way to suspension or expulsion. That particular issue, we were able to deal with it, but we didn't ignore it. It wasn't just dealt with as a freedom of speech issue. But this is something that is very challenging for us because hate speech is protected speech. And we have to make that judgment of when it crosses the line where it's targeted, deals with harassment, intimidation, and threatening type behavior. And when it crosses that line, then we will deal with it. But in many cases, it's very general and generic, and it doesn't always cross that line. And, we're a state institution, so we have to clearly follow the Constitution, as my friend, the legal counsel, will always remind us. But as Dr. Reg said earlier, that doesn't mean that we ignore the hurt and the harm that the speech caused. And that was something I think early on that we learned, that we need to acknowledge that. And we needed to say where we stand as an institution in regards to that. So, but on your particular question about political affiliation, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that one. So
before Mr. Norton comes, I do want to share just a point in terms of institutional response. So we do have student educational record is protected. by federal law. And so in this case, Dr. Harmon shared some insight in terms of response in this situation, because in this case, the organization had actually shared publicly on their own. But in terms of communication of institutional response, that is protected information, and so that isn't anything that the institution would communicate to campus.
So just on the, I guess I'm on. Yeah, there we go. Just on the issue of political speech is protected speech. That's without a doubt. And so, as an institution, we can't and don't make decisions about individuals based on the content of their speech. We don't do that, and we can't do that. And so, in terms of it being a protected class, I think in terms of First Amendment, it doesn't really matter, right? Because political speech, whether it's conservative or liberal or capitalist or socialist or whatever, that is all protected speech and is afforded the protections of the Constitution. So.
I think the critical point that I've heard in a number of discussions among administrators on this issue, it's when it rises to the level of communicating a threat or inciting violence that's where.
Yeah, so, you know, as you'll see, most speech is protected. I mean, most speech is protected by the Constitution. It's only when it crosses very limited categories where it becomes unprotected speech. So the real, I think you'll see as administrators, we focus a lot more on helping those individuals who are impacted by that speech rather than focusing on disciplining the people who have said the speech, right? We're very limited in what we can do in terms of reacting to the speaker. What we want to do is turn our attention to helping those that are impacted by the speech. And I think that's what you're hearing reflected here, because there is very limited ability to restrict speech. And I think that's a good thing on a college campus, right? I mean, that's kind of the fundamental bedrock of a public institution, is that you have free speech. And that's an important institutional value for us.
Next question.
Yeah.
You're good. It's on.
It's on? Okay.
Yeah, just keep talking.
A feasibility study was mentioned for student services. Would this include just a few of the services like student counseling in the student services building, or would this include all services like the Dean of Students office as well as student disability resources? Or
Yeah, so thank you for the question. The focus of the particular feasibility study is on the primary student health services. So Counseling Center, Thielen Student Health Center, the Student Wellness Program, Recreation Services they already have their own building, but it will be close. If we can do this, it'll be close in that same proximity. What that will do, though, is that actually opens up space, existing space, for example, if the Student Counseling Center moves into a new building, that opens up space in the Student Services building. Student Wellness, because we didn't really have a space, is in Friley Hall. Certainly not an ideal space for a premier program like that. So the goal would be to get them in a more synergistic space, but then it'll open up more spaces in buildings, because we are very space cramped. We have really complications with adding more spaces. So thank you.
People have a question here?
So on the topic of tuition, differential tuition has been proposed, as my understanding. Do you think that this is like a very plausible solution to the earlier issues you guys were talking about, as in like not having the sufficient or up to standard resources in like in the engineering department and whatnot?
I can kick things off. I mean, at the very heart of it, differential tuition is intended to align those higher cost programs, more expensive programs, with revenue, higher revenue, which can then track and follow those expenses. So it better aligns the revenue and cost, and so that certainly will be, differential tuition is something we already use in certain programs, and so I think that is going to be one of the ways in which we can address some of these areas where there are critical needs, particularly where they are lab or studio intensive. So you just inherently have a higher cost of instruction. And so really deploying more differentials has been something that has been under discussion for some time now. And I do think that it will need to be part of the solution moving forward.
Thank you for the question. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name. Hannah? Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for the question. I'd like to talk a little bit about the differential tuition. And there's different philosophies and thoughts about how universities should do tuition. You know, one idea is that you just raise the base rate. Everybody pays the same rate across campus. Another is that you don't really do it that way. Instead, you charge by class. You know, some universities do that. The approach we've taken here, which is now about a decade old, I think this probably started around 2007 or 2008, was to institute differential tuitions in the majors that have a known, demonstrated higher cost of instruction. And the first differential tuitions were in the College of Engineering. And there, the higher cost really has to do with the technology, the labs, and you can see why that would be the case and why it would be more expensive to teach an engineering major than someone, say, who's majoring in the humanities because of the labs and things. The College of Business then also implemented differential tuition. And by the way, that's the case here at Iowa State as well as at the University of Iowa, both in engineering and business. Pretty common, actually, for that to be the case around the country. And in the College of Business, the higher cost is not the technology and labs necessarily, but because of the higher salaries for faculty in the College of Business. It's a it's a market. We operate in a market environment, different disciplines. The faculty salaries have to be higher in order to have high quality faculty. And so in both those cases, when differential tuition started, the commitment, the accountability that we have to students and the commitment is that the additional tuition that comes into those programs, is guaranteed to go back into those programs. It's not going to go somewhere else. It's going to go to those programs. And then the deans are accountable to the students in those programs on how that money is used. So for instance, the College of Business prioritized hiring more faculty. And they were able to, and the Dean Spalding can show this on how the student-faculty ratio improved and how class sizes, became smaller in the College of Business when they were able to do that, very, very successful. And so the deans have an accountability process to students where students can share priorities, things they see, this lab, this studio, this class, and then the dean can take that information into consideration when he or she then is making budget decisions, and in turn will report back to students each year on the decisions that were made on how differential tuition would be used. So in fact, if you go into Elings Hall, for instance, and you look at one of the laboratories in the Ag and Biosystems Engineering Department, you'll actually see a sign on the wall. This laboratory was made possible because of differential tuition, things like that. So we made the sort of institutional decision about a decade ago that rather than raise the base tuition kind of the same amount and have some majors sort of subsidize other majors, that we would align the tuition rate with the cost of instruction in that particular program. Because of some of the issues I talked about earlier on the student-faculty ratio, the condition of some labs and facilities, things like that, the deans have really worked together as a team, and I'm very proud of their work. For about the past 18 months or so, last year at this time, there was also a conversation going on about differential tuition. And there were different versions of it, different models. This program, that program, upper division, lower division. And it was a partnership with student government. And we had open discussions about it. And what came out of that with the Board of Regents approval last year was differential tuition in 5 new programs on campus. And that has now been implemented, and the accountability, the transparency, and commitment to students of how that money will be used and reinvested back into the program continues for that. So the deans have identified a set of programs that are very stretched right now, where quality, we're very concerned about it. And many of these programs are majors that have laboratories associated with them, or studios. Studios in the College of Design, for instance, by accreditation standards have to meet certain criteria, and they have to be of a certain size and that kind of thing. Our Department of Economics, while it does not have laboratories per se, the salaries, the market for top faculty in economics is more similar to the College of Business than anything else. And that's another area that we've been looking at. And so really all of our deans have been having conversations with students. I think the last number I saw was around 30 different meetings that deans have had, either town halls, meeting with their student councils, sending emails. The College of Agriculture and Life Sciences has done, I think, a lot of excellent work in this area, as well as the College of Human Sciences. And I know Dean Spalding and Dean Royala have met with their students. Dean Beata Schmidtman has met with students in many different programs to talk about this. And again, in an ideal world, we wouldn't raise tuition and we wouldn't implement differential tuition. But I firmly believe that it's essential to maintain the quality in these programs. I'm a faculty member in engineering. I used to chair one of our engineering departments. So I saw firsthand, front lines, how that basically preserved the quality in our engineering programs when that was first implemented. So again, it's a conversation that is still underway. It's not a completed proposal by any means. We're talking about it tonight. We will continue to talk about it in the coming days and weeks. It's vitally important to have your ideas, and we have used ideas we've received from students already, incorporating it in our thinking of what this proposal could look like. So thank you very much for the important question.
And we want to try to get to as many questions as possible, so we want to ask our panelists to certainly be as brief as we can. Rachel, you have a question?
Thank you all for being here tonight. So my question, Iowa State has implemented many initiatives for students for health and well-being. So we've really increased the number of resources we have available for students. But through my own experiences, one of the biggest problems is in the classroom, that our teachers and our professors don't always fully understand the idea of holistic health. They view education as our #1 reason we're here, which is true, but don't always consider those other factors going on. And so my question is, what are we doing to improve the classroom environment and to ensure our professors see students holistically?
Well, thank you for the question. And I'd point to two things. One is the inclusive classroom initiative that I described earlier, and one of the aspects of that is what we call our learner-centered checklist for faculty, which helps faculty think about how they design their class, how they develop their syllabus, what their classroom policies are. And it is essentially the best practices that we want faculty to follow. And that has been an outcome of that particular initiative. That's one example. The other thing I can point to is actually very recent. Just as we have student government, we have something that's called the Faculty Senate on campus, and that's the body that really collectively represents the faculty. And the Faculty Senate has been working on language around the issue of resources for student health and wellness, hotlines, important offices in the Division of Student Affairs, as Martino has spoken about, that students need to be aware of. And so we've developed that language, and we're now going to make it available to faculty so that the phone numbers, the offices, can be very clearly identified on course syllabus. And just the third thing, very, very quickly, I'll say is many of you know that we are or have rolled out the new Canvas learning management system, and one of the features we will have in there is to be able to have this information easily accessible there as well, and even at critical, I'd say, stressful times during the semester, around midterms, around finals, and so forth, be able to put out messages through the Canvas system that would help students and faculty, be aware.
I'll be super quick. So in the summer, our counseling center hosted a workshop. Rachel asked that question, right? Our counseling center hosted a workshop primarily for academic advisors, but it was also open to faculty or anyone in academic affairs. And it was really a 2-day workshop on how to recognize the signs of anxiety, depression, a student who may be suicidal, how to recognize those signs and what to do about those. We also, when Provost Wickard has the new faculty orientation, it's really like a conference, and part of that conference, our Dean of Students, Student Assistance Office, they do a presentation on really servicing students who may be in crisis or have crisis situations. And then finally, our wellness program, our student wellness program, was actually designed by a wellness task force, which included some faculty members, but also as they go into classrooms to conduct presentations, obviously the faculty members are not only there, but they're requesting them to come in. So, Rachel, I'll be honest with you, I think there's a whole landscape of more that we can do. I mean, I can really see us getting to the point where we have literally a conference on campus that can be for faculty and staff to really learn more about what we can do. So I think we're really just here, and we could be here. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. I believe we have a question here.
Hello, my name is Carter McNew. I'm a senior in mechanical engineering. This should be my last semester if all things go right. I guess my question or topic that I just wanted to get your input on is integrating technology and the, I guess, pros and cons between doing a more technology-based education in a lot of these larger classes for freshmen and sophomore, predominantly newer students coming in. As what was mentioned before, hopefully we'll be hiring more faculty to bring the student to faculty ratio down. But with new technology coming out, a lot of classes are doing pretty much posting stuff online, allowing students to learn at their own leisure, more or less. So I can kind of broaden the question so anyone can talk. How are you integrating technology to keep prices low or tuition low for students, and also provide students an optimal educational environment moving forward?
Can
If I can just really quickly, thank you for the question. I think that's an extremely interesting approach that we're, in the area of diversity and inclusion, we're struggling with a little bit. Because on the one hand, people ask for a much broader education and training program for freshmen, for new students, for faculty, staff, et cetera. And when you have some 42,000 odd affiliates of Iowa State University, the distribution of that content, you have to get to the core of how do we communicate these messages out to a broad scale, but understanding that in the use of technology, it loses a lot of the granular, more important components, the interface, the level of engagement necessary to really forward the diversity and inclusion. So I just want to say I appreciate it. That's something actually that we're struggling with, the use of technology to do the work that we're doing.
It's a great question. I mean, this is a time of change and disruption, if that's the right word, of higher education. And we've seen other kinds of technological changes. The steam engine, industrialization, computers, biotechnology. Higher ed is now in that same kind of change mode in how do you use technology in the classroom, and how do you use technology to improve student learning. You may remember, I don't know, 5 or so years ago, the big buzzword was MOOCs, M-O-O-C-S, right? Massive open online courses. These are these free courses you take where there might be 100,000 students, right, around the world that would enroll in them. Coursera and edX and various organizations started up, and it was a real hot thing in Silicon Valley, for a while. And the buzz then was residential campuses like Iowa State are dead, right? Because these free open online courses, everybody's just going to take these classes online, and you don't need professors anymore. You'll just have the computer and these videos, and people around the world will take these free classes, and higher education as we know it is completely dead. Well, what's happened now is all the startup companies on MOOCs have gone broke, and enrollment is going through the roof at Iowa State University. So I think the key thing that I think about, as a faculty member with respect to technology is how do you use the technology for good, okay? And what I mean by that is how do you use the technology so that the face-to-face time in class adds value, adds the most value, right? So if you just take a class and put it online, okay, whatever. But if you can redesign the challenge for faculty is to redesign the classes, right? So this actually is a burden or challenge that goes on the shoulders of the faculty. You take a class you've been teaching now for 10 years. You need to redesign it. It's not just taking the class and video recording it and putting it online. That's a very poor, really, approach to take. But if you redesign the pedagogy of the class, and then you take the one-way material, right, the chalk and talk, writing stuff, or just the one-way presentation, and everybody just writes it down, that kind of thing you can put online. And if you do that, then you take the valuable time, and that's the valuable face-to-face time, and you actually make the class better because you get the team-based learning. So our faculty across campus, team-based learning, TBL, is something that's really growing on campus because you're working in small groups. And then you go into an auditorium like Troxel, it's designed for this, where the seats swivel, so you can have everybody work on things and the faculty member can kind of walk up and down the aisles. So the fun thing about the technology is not just putting it online, but redesigning the classes. So the one-way stuff goes online, and then the in-class can be a richer discussion. And if you do that right, the quality of learning actually increases. And we've done those studies to be able to show that's the case. We've got a lot more to do on this, but that is the vision of where we want to end up.
We've reached the 7 o'clock hour, but if there's one last question that may be there, we do want to provide the opportunity for one final question if we have it. All right.
And I think all of us are going to kind of be up here. If anybody wants to come up afterwards and chat, we're available to do that too.
Well, thank you all again for being here. Let's thank our panelists for sharing with us. And again, we thank you for being here and being engaged in this important dialogue. So I hope you have a great evening.
This is a great idea. Yeah. Cody, thank you.
Oh, no, that's cool. Let me come down to you.
Thank you very much.